You gotta stop trying your best. It's not worth it. You're just burning yourself out. And frankly, people don't even deserve your best, your very extreme best. And nobody's asking for it either. I may feel like it, but it's not true. Welcome to the podcast, by the way. This is perhaps episode 4. We just started this podcast very recently. And this episode, I want to get a lot more personal. Last couple episodes, I was talking about some stuff going on in the world, some stuff I've been thinking about. But this episode, from before I started the podcast, I knew eventually I wanted to do this episode and talk about something that I've been personally learning and struggling with. And I have this thing I wrote about a year ago. I wrote down what some of my friends told me to help me start thinking differently about my own perfectionism and my own desire to be seen as good and for people to acknowledge my hard work and to not lose any momentum of people acknowledging my hard work. Like all this junk rooted in ego. And this whole episode, we're just going to talk about that. So if you're like me at all, when I say try your best, you know that I don't really mean just go out and give an effort. Because I think that some people may push back against this message and feel like, oh, so never put any effort in? Just be apathetic and not care and not try to actually give yourself at all? No. When I say try your best, for me, that means burning myself out, grinding myself to nothingness, to do every single thing I possibly can to make something the best it can be until I have nothing left. And I'm just a shell of a human being and proud that I at least acted on every single little idea to make it as perfect as I can be. That's what my best looks like. And I know some of you out there can relate. That's what I'm talking about when I say like trying your best. And there's this message in society that you need to always do your very, very, very best whenever you go out there and try to do something. And if you're not, then you don't really care. Or if you don't, then you're not going to get the recognition you're searching for. Or if you don't, then you're not going to achieve the things that you're trying to achieve. You're not going to be a good competitor in the things you're trying to compete for. But it's like, when you're always doing that version of your best, then you burn out and exhaust yourself and take yourself out of the journey that you're on pretty quickly. And so let's get this started. I have this little thing on the side of notes and that thing I wrote like a year ago of what my friends told me. It's all written out here. And I was thinking of making this into like organizing it more into like bullets to help me and to not look so much to the side. But I'm like, no, I want to be able to say really what I feel. And so I captured my feelings well here. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so the other thing I could have done was to just memorize all this, which I've done before. I've done sermons at churches and talks at different places where I wrote out like a 20-minute talk word by word. When I first started doing talks, I would just do bullet points and get the feel for it in that way. But then one day there was like just so much I wanted to say, and I wanted to say it in a very specific and effective way. And so I decided, let me just script this whole thing out. And I want to be able to present myself as someone who is really good at this and should be listened to and is really creative. So let me memorize this whole thing so that there's no point where I'm looking at notes. Because that's what a lot of people do when they're giving talks or sermons, is they have like a notepad or an iPad or a phone, something that they're looking down at to help them stay on track to what they prepared. But I was like, I've seen these other people who are able to just give talks without looking at anything, and it looks so good and it looks so professional. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to memorize word for word this 20-minute talk that I would give one time for a room of like 20 to 30 people who by now have definitely forgotten about it. I wasn't even paid either, by the way. It was just, it was just like, this is what I love to do, and I want to do my very best, and I'm going to go over and beyond and doing my very, very best. And I wrote it in a way that wouldn't sound like it's written, that would sound like it's coming off the cuff. I wrote it in a very conversational style so that not only would I be able to recite this thing perfectly, but people wouldn't even know that I was reciting a script, that they would feel like, wow, this guy is so deep and smart and creative and profound that he's able to say this whole talk with such efficiency and effectiveness and creativity without even, and to do it conversationally, like he's just talking to us. Like that's what's in my head, thinking that that'll make it more impactful. And so I gave this 20-minute talk. I did this like a few times, at least like 5 times. And it did well. I memorized it, recited it word for word. Nobody knew. I told some of my close friends, hey, did you know I actually... It's like I needed some recognition of my work, but really what I was looking for, I think, was some recognition of my pain of working this hard. Like, hey, homie, I actually wrote all that out and memorized it. And they're like, no way, you're lying. And then I showed them the full script and it was like, what? Mind blown. And it was like a little bit of affirmation, like, yep, there you go. That's what I was looking for. Now I can chill. And it's like, when you think about all that work that went into that, it's like, that's it? That's all you're doing it for? All of that work. It's like, if I were to just have something to look down at and keep track of my thoughts and show a little bit of vulnerability, it wouldn't really have that much of a different effect on the people listening. Really, what I was looking for was to look like I'm really good at what I do. And I was elevating that as a priority over it actually being effective and helpful for people listening. And so there's been many times throughout my whole life where I felt like I needed to do my very best to not only make it effective, but also to show people how good I am at what I do. And not even in like a full on, like, I want everybody to think I'm good, but rather I want people to like think I'm worthy. Like, I don't necessarily need people to think I'm the best. I'm looking for people to think I deserve to be up here. I deserve to have a voice. Because there's those insecurities all throughout my life of feeling like I'm not good enough, or I don't have the right certifications and degrees and experience. And so I need to go over and beyond at proving that I'm worthy. And so I wrote a book in 2020, 2021, and put it out in 2022 called The God Who Riots, Taking Back the Radical Jesus. And it was really hard, but I did it, put it out. Then had this several months of promoting the book and trying my best at that, trying to be on as many podcasts as I could with that, make as many little videos to promote it as I could. And by the end of that, I was super burnt out and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't make stuff online the way I wanted to anymore. I couldn't write the way I wanted to. I had all these ideas for another book, which I'm working on now, but I couldn't make myself do what I wanted to make myself do. I couldn't make myself be creative. And so I had to change my approach. And so I started looking at the different parts of my life that I was neglecting, like my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, my social health. And I started exercising, started getting more sun, which is super important, getting that sun, drinking water, the typical things, eating better, meditating, journaling, using a calendar, trying to make sure I don't just live life trying to keep everything in my head, and tracking things, and really trying to take back what I had neglected for a while. Because my approach to writing that book and to promoting that book was to just give all the energy I possibly could to that, which meant I was neglecting different things, and also neglecting hanging out with friends and family. And I realized, like, whoa, there's these chunks of life that I completely missed out on. It's like this unhealthy approach that I had to creativity was always there, but it was only exposed when I used that approach on a very huge and long project. It's like I had always approached creative projects as like, let me just tunnel vision, block everything else in my life out, and just focus on this. And when that's like a YouTube video, that's like what? A half day, a full day, maybe 2 days of just focusing on that thing. It would usually be like a day, and it would be fine. But when it's a book and it's like day after day, and then it's like months pass and I haven't been present with anyone in my life. Like, I would see them, but I wasn't really present. I would just spend that time thinking about, oh, I shouldn't be here. I have some free time now, and that should be going to the book. That should be going toward making stuff. That should be going toward this or that this creative project that I'm neglecting because of the book or whatever. And it's like, I wasn't really present, and life passed me by. And I felt eventually terrible about it. And like I said, it's like that certain unhealthy approach was exposed only when it was with this very big project. And so I realized, yeah, I need a big change here. And I started to realize I'm also a bit of a perfectionist, because I did all these things differently in my life, getting sun, drinking water, eating better, journaling, and yet I felt a lot better, but I was still struggling to write. So it was like, okay, there's something else here. And I think I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'm struggling to get any writing done at all. And I realize writing is decision making. It's like you're deciding what words to use, what sentence to use, what order to put them in, how to say something, what adjective to use, how long or short should a statement be, how much you should get into something versus how concise you should be. And I wanted to make the right decisions, which left me unable to do anything. And so I remember I was talking to my therapist about this, and she asked me if I had ever talked to any of my friends about this struggle, this creative struggle, this creative block I was in. And I said no, because I feel like this is very like confusing for me, and it's hard to figure out how to get things done, but I feel like this is something I need to figure out. And if I were to tell any of my friends, they would just encourage me by saying, hey man, you got this. You can do it. You got this. You're good at this. You got this. Which I had heard plenty of times from different friends before. And I felt like, why would I share this struggle with them if all they're going to tell me is, you got this? I already know what they're going to say. And as I was saying that, I already knew what was coming from my therapist, which is, no, you don't know. You're just assuming that they're not going to have anything else to say. You don't really know because you haven't tried. So it was like, you need to try. So the next day, I talked to my friend Nick, and very good friend, very creative friend. We think a lot alike in different ways, and he has his own wedding videography business. That's his main thing right now is videography. And I shared with him about some of these perfectionist struggles I was having, and he related a lot with that perfectionism. And there's this thing that happens when that we were resonating with each other, that when we are working on something, whether it's like a video or song, we've made little songs together before, or a script for something, or writing or anything. When we are working on something, we get an idea that would make it a little bit better. The next part of that thought process is, I have to do it. If I got the little idea to make it a little bit better, then it has to be done. And I can't move on unless I do that thing. And it would, of course, make the project take way longer. But I think the thought process is, if it could be better, then it should be better. If I could see the ways a project could be better, then I have to do those things before putting it out there in the world. And that happens with so many different types of even like little graphics that I would put on like a little Instagram post of just noticing that it could be centered a little bit better. It could, oh, that color isn't exactly right, or that could be a slightly different font, a slightly different size. And it's just a quick thing, but it feels like, even though this is such a small thing that people are going to forget about tomorrow, if it can be better, it should be better. If I can see a little way that it could be slightly better, then I can't let myself let go of it until I do it. And even when I have an editor, I've had an editor on the first book that worked with the publisher with Broadleaf Books, and I have an editor with this book, same editor, and I've had an editor for other writing projects I've done. And the point of an editor is to help you shape this thing, to give them a rough draft, and they can help you in any way you ask. And yet with this thinking of, I got to do every little thing I can think of to make it better, the habit I got into was the draft that with the thinking that if I send an editor a draft, the draft I send them has to be as good as I can possibly make it, so that I can get notes from an editor for suggestions that I'm not aware of. It's like, because the thinking, this like paranoid thinking would be, if I send them a rough draft that has parts that I know I can improve on, or that I know I should put this or that in there, or that I know I'm going to explain this better when I have the chance to. And then I send it to them, and then all their notes are just suggestions that I already knew I was going to do. Then it would be a waste of both of our times. That was the paranoid mindset. And so therefore, I need to make it the best I possibly can, act on every single suggestion I can come up with, so that they can come up with suggestions that I can't come up with. which would slow down everything and stress me out and burn me out for rough drafts or first drafts. And I screwed myself multiple times with that, missed several deadlines because of that, frustrated my editors because I needed to like make it the best it could be before I could send it to them. And it's like unhealthy and doesn't work. And that's actually not what an editor is for. And Nick told me that his friend, who's also a wedding videographer, who's helped him a lot in the beginning and was a huge mentor when he started out. And he said one day that friend told him, I don't make the best wedding videos, but I make more money than any other local wedding videographer. And that's because his friend doesn't waste time trying to make every single video the absolute best it could possibly be, acting on every single little idea that pops up to make it the best thing he's ever done. Instead, he makes it as good as it needs to be so that he can then move on to the next one. Because here's what I didn't see coming when I started being creative when I was very little, and then when I started writing, and then when I started writing and making stuff about the things I write and make stuff about now. What I didn't see coming is that the better you get at something, the more mistakes you notice, the more little ways you notice something could be better. When I was younger, I thought when you get better at something, things become easier and quicker because you've improved in your skill. When actually it could easily be the opposite, where you reach a certain skill level that gives you an insight into all kinds of little ways it could be better that you didn't have before. And because you have this new insight that has come with you becoming better at that skill, you end up taking way longer. You could potentially take way longer and work way harder because you see more ways that it could be better than you did when you were less skilled at that thing. I thought it was going to be easier and faster, and it became harder and slower and would take longer and more frustrating. But it took me a while to realize that's a sign that I'm better. Because it doesn't feel like that initially. It feels like, have I gotten worse? Because this is harder and taking longer? Have I lost it? Have I lost any gift I had? Am I washed up? Have I fallen off? But it's like, no, you just know more now and could do better now. And if you're not careful, that could turn into you taking way longer and being way more insecure, way more doubtful in yourself. And so, me and Nick talked about that a lot of that extra effort is unnecessary. The better you get, the more effort you're capable of putting in. But it's not always worth it. People just want value. Like, people just want what they want. People just like we all know this capitalist lie that if you just make the best thing, then you'll win. That's BS. We know that those who are the absolute best at things, that's not enough. And it could slow everything way down. And it doesn't actually work that way. Like, I think of some of the best singers ever. Like, and the stuff that they give to people, every song isn't showing how good they are at singing. The best songs are giving us songs that we can all sing along to and remember forever. If they were to put out, like, think of like Michael Jackson and the songs he put out there. If he put out songs that were just exhibiting how high he can sing, how like unique his range can be, singing notes that other singers aren't even capable of, doing it in a cadence and flow that other people would struggle to keep. because that is what he's capable of. If he were to do that, that would not be enjoyable. He's not using he wasn't using his platform to show how good he was. He was using his platform to give something that people would enjoy. And so it's all ego that makes you think, I need to show people how good I am every single time I show up. It's like, don't give people what you can. This is what I learned. Don't give people what you can, which can be a lot. Give people what they need, which is very different. The better you get at something, those two things become further and further and further apart. Doing the best you can, doing all that you can, versus just giving people what they need, what they're actually looking for. Those two things become so different. With any skill that you get at, with cooking, with communicating, with writing, with art, with any field really. And I hope some of you are thinking how this can relate to different parts of your own life and skills and gifts and passions. It's like, I realize I need to stop trying to impress people. Eminem, let's give another example. Eminem, if we're honest, is probably technically the best rapper. Technically is the key word here. Doesn't make his music good anymore. Like everybody else when I was younger, I was a big fan of his older stuff. And then he made this shift like around Recovery, the album Recovery, to where he was just trying to be super skilled, extremely skilled, have like the most punchlines he could stuff into a song. And then also like a little bit after Recovery, making sure every syllable rhymed, like a full, not just like the last 3 or 4 syllables of the line, but the full line, rhyming the full line to the next line, every syllable, and having a ton of punchlines and even rapping super fast, like on the Rap God song, is way faster than everybody. And it's like his later stuff, you listen to it, and if we're going just based on technical skill, he's exhibiting that on a technical level. He's like probably the best out right now. But on a level of enjoying the music, this new version of Eminem is far, far from the best. Perhaps one of the worst, to be honest. Like, it's not fun to put in your car, to even listen by yourself or to like at a party. Nobody wants to listen to Rap God when you're chilling with your friends. I'm a superhuman. No, nobody cares, bro. It's like, let's make something that's enjoyable for people. That's so much more worth it. If you're just doing this just so people can say, yeah, you're technically the best, man, but I'm not going to enjoy your music. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. And I relate to that so much with my approach to being a perfectionist in my writing. I'm just stuck there trying really hard. And that's partly why I disappeared for a while on YouTube and stuff. And like, I was trying really hard to try my best. And when I couldn't do that, I felt too scared to show up at all. And that's partly why I started this podcast, because I wanted a creative outlet to be able to show up consistently as I am and do it in a way that's easier so that I can do it consistently. Stop trying to impress people. Just give them what they're looking for. Give him some joy. Let's move on. I took a lot longer than I thought I would on what Nick said. And so there's this voice in my head like, oh my God, you took way too long. People are going to tune out. You're just rambling, Damon. You gotta you gotta re-record this and make it way shorter. Like, bro, screw that. It's just a podcast, bro. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This could be better. Doesn't mean it should be. Because I want to get this out. I want to get this out there. And if I took even longer making this perfect and concise, then it would take a lot longer for you to hear anything I have to say about this subject. And maybe you would never even hear it because I would take forever. Here's what my friend Colin said. He's a musician, also a writer, a psychiatrist, really smart guy. Also, me and him think a lot alike in a lot of things as well. And I talked to him about my struggle with writing. And he reminded me, yeah, writing's really hard. And he talked about how when he was writing his thesis, he was writing his master's thesis while I was writing my first book. And so it was cool. We got to like relate with each other on that and write together a little bit. And he was reminding me that like, yeah, that was like the hardest thing he had to do, and creating something out of nothing. And all his demons coming up, you know, metaphorical demons coming up when working on this thing that's so hard. And that was like good to hear as well, because I forget. I get so like shameful on myself that I can forget that, oh yeah, the thing you're trying to do is also hard. Like don't hate on yourself so much. Of course it's hard. Of course you're having a hard time. But then he suggested like time blocking, set it in time of the day every day to just work on the book and work on a thing and spend the rest of the day doing something else, forgetting about it. But then here's what I found really interesting. He suggested just writing shitty. And he talked about how when he tried to be a serious musician and write seriously good songs, it never worked. So he just decided to write shitty songs and be okay with it. And then those shitty songs got naturally better, organically, over time. I know some of you will be like, yep, this is how it works. Some of you are like, no way. That doesn't make any sense. That's totally against what I would assume. But here's the thing. I think there was something that I hadn't considered at all before. And it's that last bit of how things actually get better. Like, I've heard about this concept before, especially when people talk about creative block and writer's block, of just write badly, edit later. Separate your writing mind and your editor mind and just get the stuff out there and or write a vomit draft, some people would say, where you just vomit the thing out and fix it later, because it's a lot easier to edit something that already exists. So I've heard all these ideas before, but I would only think about them as a method of getting out of a rut, getting unstuck. But I hadn't considered the idea of committing yourself to just doing shitty writing and allowing yourself to get better organically, as opposed to how I typically would think about how you get better at something. Before, I would think the way you get better at something is by trying your very best every single time. Because every time, you're pushing as hard as you can against your limits. And so it's like, it's all about, if I want to improve, then I have to do better than I did last time. If I want to improve, I have to find my limits and my weaknesses and push harder. And if I do that every time, then I get better every time. If I do better than the last time, each time, then that's how I get better. That's how I would typically think of it. This other approach is not about trying your best, but about getting it done. Doing a good enough job, accepting the shittiness of it, and deciding to only do that kind of work so that that version of your work gets better and better and better and better over time, instead of needing to push yourself to your very limits every time. And I think of like some of my favorite rappers will make like 10 to 20 songs a day. People like Young Thug, Future, Playboy Cardi. 10 to 20 songs a day because they're freestyling and punching in. They don't write. Like this really started with like Jay-Z wouldn't write, and then Lil Wayne learning about that decided he's not going to write anymore either. Let me just freestyle. Let me just say what's on my mind. And punching in that world means like you could just do a song where you just hear the beat and then just say the whole thing, rap the whole thing off the top of the head. But this other way is to listen to the beat, try to think of a line, and then rap a line, maybe 2 lines, and then stop and listen back and try to think of the next line, listen back, realize, oh wait, I didn't catch the beat there, or let me just mumble a bit, and that third line. Let me, in this next take, go again, go back, let me mumble something else, but now I got a couple words in there, book and car, and and then you do that until you say something, and then move on to the 4th line. Same thing. Go back, listen to it, try to come up with something else. 5th line, 6th line, 8th, 9th, 10th. That's punching in. And so it's like by doing that, that's like a much more raw version of your skill level. And it's like they may be able to write something better if they sat down and try to write the very best song they could. But instead, by freestyling and punching in, they elevate their lyrical ability at that level, at the most raw, shitty level, over time into something really good. To the point where their freestyling and punching in version of songs can become just as good, if not better, than if they were to sit and think and write something down. Which sounds impossible. Like there's a version of me in the past that like everything I'm saying would sound like nonsense, counterintuitive, opposite. Like it just doesn't make sense until you actually start trying out this other way of approaching your work and your creativity. And so it's like the question is that I would have is like, well, what about the potential? If it could potentially be good, then if it could potentially be better, then you should make it better. But that slows down the work and burns you out quickly. If you're always going off of, well, if it can be better, then it should be better. You make way less stuff and you get better slower. Like I never thought of it like that. Like, what if the key to recovering from this perfectionism and burnout and writing what I want to write, making videos, making podcasts, what if the key was not doing my very best every time and pushing myself to my limits? What if it was just like doing a mediocre job and getting better gradually, organically? Like if I took a year to write my very best every single time I wrote something versus a year of just writing shitty and mediocre every time I wrote something, what would be my what would be the difference in my skill level by the end of the year? And I really believe I would probably be better in the version of the year where I'm just writing shitty, because I'm getting more practice. Like, oh man, there's this old, I wish I had remembered all the details, but there was this old experiment I heard of in this art class where the art teacher had people like make this thing, like pottery type thing, I forget the word, and split up in two groups. One group, their goal was to make one object and to make it the best they could. The quality group. The other group was the quantity group, where their task was to make as many of those objects as they can. And by the end, guess which group was able to produce the best object? The group that sat around and thought really hard and tried to make the most perfect object they can and was able to have the time and energy to do so because they only had one thing they had to do? Or the quantity group who just kept making. It was the quantity group, because they had that practice, because they were able to get into a different kind of creative flow by just doing the work. And so here's what my friend Frank said. I was talking to my friend Frank about this after some of these conversations, and I was saying, like, yeah, I'm having these revelations of, like, maybe I should just be okay with more mediocre, shitty writing and naturally get better at that over time. And then he said, oh yeah, it's like you're raising the floor instead of the ceiling. And that blew my mind. I really, really like this metaphor. It's so fitting. It's not perfect, but it's like it fit exactly how I felt, because that version of getting better where I'm trying my very best, pushing my limits every time, felt like I had my hands up all the way to the ceiling, my arms extended as far as they can, just pushing every single time I had to do something, which would leave me exhausted. But instead, this other way is raising the floor, which I said this metaphor isn't perfect because I don't even know how that how that works, but it made sense at the time of, like, oh yeah, perfect. Like, yeah, just letting the floor rise around you and raising yourself that way instead of pushing really hard at the top every single time. And I decided it's a waste of time just trying so hard and burning myself out, exhausting myself every single time. It's about doing what needs to be done, making something that people enjoy, and not trying to impress people. And the big thing is it's about practice. It's like almost like getting your reps in type of thing. Like I realized I needed practice, because here's the other thing. I had these big revelations about my creative approach to things like a little over a year ago, but I'm still not really living it out. That's why it took so long to start this podcast, and why I'm taking a very long time writing this book, way longer than I planned to. I'm still very much struggling to write this book. I am stuck right now on the book, but it's because I need practice. Like, I've gotten better in little ways, but I need to keep practicing. And like I said, that's partly why I started this podcast. Seriously, to get that practice and get my creativity flowing in a different way to try to help me in every area of my life. Like, if I could show up consistently at this thing, then perhaps it would be easier to show up consistently in other areas of my life. Like, not just creatively, but also like with friends and family and my health and all those other things I neglect. And so let me lastly say what my friend Casey said when I asked her about this. And Casey has helped me, has been one of my editors in the past for different, like this project that we do together, writing. And she's also been like a huge help for me. We also think a lot alike in different ways. And she reminded me, I don't need to give the best of me to people. And frankly, they don't deserve it. But also, they're not even asking for it either. Like there was this thing that I had to do, that I had to put out, and that I was writing and that she was helping me edit. And it's like, I didn't really need to do everything I can to make it as perfect as it can be. And people weren't actually looking for that. It was just, it's kind of like the sermons I was talking about earlier. It's like, you just need to do the thing and put it out there, knowing that it can be better, but you need to put it out there and stop missing deadlines and stop stressing yourself out and burning out and stressing out your editor. It's like, you just put it out. Because remember, when I say doing your best, I mean grinding yourself till you have nothing left and you're empty and burnt out and stressed and sad and angry. But at least you did every little thing you can think of to make it as best as it can be. And remember, like I said, if you want, the better you get, the more little things you'll notice can be better. And so I have gotten better at writing and communicating over the years. And so that process has become harder and harder because I didn't expect it. I wasn't looking for it when it came. And so that's what I mean when I say people don't deserve your best. Nobody deserves you working yourself that hard, you burning yourself out that much. Nobody deserves that. You don't own that. You don't owe that to anyone. And nobody's even asking for it either. It's like my desire to make something the best it could possibly be is giving people way more than what they actually need and what they're actually asking for. And if it slows everything down and makes you miserable, it's not worth it. And so she asked me, like, what are you so afraid of when we were talking about my perfectionism? And I said, it took me a while. And I said, I don't know, but the only thing I could come up with at the time was, I think I'm just afraid of writing bad. And she said, like, you need to give yourself the opportunity to do bad writing. And you have grace with yourself, especially if you have an editor. Like, you could give bad writing to an editor and that'll help you out. And I need to have grace, way more grace with myself. And I need to practice this different approach. And I need to practice having grace with myself. And so that's what I mean when I say stop trying your best. People don't deserve it and they're not asking for it. I hope you could think of your own way that this message I'm giving y'all can relate to your own life, your own gifts and passions, and what you're trying to do in the world. Let me know in these comments if you resonate with any of this. This is on YouTube, by the way. That's why I say in these comments, or you can message me on Instagram at whoisdamon. Follow me on Instagram. And we got a brand new YouTube channel now, for those that don't know, for the podcast, for the video version of the podcast. And we're also on audio podcasts on all the podcast apps. But yeah, this brand new YouTube channel is just called Perhaps with Damon Garcia. And thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. It feels really good to be able to have this outlet, to be able to show up consistently and be myself, be vulnerable with y'all, and talk with y'all. I appreciate it. And I'll see y'all next week, next Friday. Bye-bye.